Brianna Caldwell forced her maid to sleep outside in minus 10 degrees Celsius Chicago cold as punishment. No gloves, no heat, no way back inside. Celeste Monroe, 32 years old, in a thin work uniform, hands tucked into her sleeves, sat in an iron garden chair and said nothing. She did not beg. She did not cry. She had made a decision 6 months earlier that nobody in that house knew about. A quiet, terrifying decision made at 11 o'clock at night with shaking hands and everything she had. And that decision was about to pull up to the front gate. What Brianna didn't know was that a black Rolls-Royce Cullinan was already driving toward her house, and the person inside it had something for Celeste that would change every single thing about this night. By morning, Brianna Caldwell would never be able to look at her maid the same way again, because by morning, there would be no maid. Celeste Monroe grew up on the south side of Chicago, the daughter of a church secretary who believed, with the whole of her body, that dignity was not something the world gave you. It was something you kept inside yourself regardless of what the world did. Her mother, Miss Evelyn, used to say, "Baby, they can take your chair. They cannot take your posture." Celeste had carried that line through 32 years of hard weather. Through her husband leaving, through raising 2 children alone, through 3 cleaning jobs in 8 years. She had carried it into the tall limestone house on North Lincoln Avenue, where she had worked as a live-in maid for the past 14 months. The Caldwell house was beautiful, the way an expensive cage is beautiful. Raymond Caldwell was a corporate attorney at a Loop firm. Tall, quiet, generous in that particular way of men who have never had to argue for anything. His wife, Brianna, 34, ran a luxury interior design firm out of River North and had the kind of presence that made rooms notice her before she said a word. Raymond also had a daughter from his first marriage, Lily, 14, quiet and serious, the kind of child who apologized for things that weren't her fault. Lily's mother had died when the girl was 6. She'd been living in this house for 3 years now. "She's not my daughter," Brianna told her friends at Sunday brunch, always with a careful smile. "But I love her like she is. You know me." She did not love her like she was. Celeste understood this within her first 2 weeks, not from anything dramatic, but from the small things. The way Brianna forgot to include Lily when she ordered dinner. The way she corrected the girl's posture with a touch 1 degree too firm to be affectionate. The way she never called Lily by name when Raymond wasn't in the room. Lily ate quietly, did homework alone, smiled the whole time her father was present, and went still the moment he left. Celeste noticed all of it. She recognized it. She said nothing. She folded laundry, mopped floors, polished marble. She made $1,800 a month, had Sundays off, and kept a small savings account she had been building for 5 years. $5,000, every dollar left over, after she sent $1,200 home to cover Jordan's university fees and Amara's school costs. That account was her only shield. She had promised herself she would not touch it except for an opportunity so rare it bordered on impossible. She had never imagined the opportunity would come from inside the very house that employed her. The moment that made it impossible to pretend happened on a Thursday evening in October, 6 weeks into the job. Brianna had 4 guests for dinner, women from her design circle, all silk blouses and careful laughter. Celeste had spent the better part of the afternoon preparing the table. Pressed linen, the good crystal, a centerpiece Brianna had sketched out and left for her to execute. She had done it exactly right. She knew she had done it exactly right. Brianna walked into the dining room with her guests, surveyed the table for 2 seconds, and turned toward the kitchen doorway where Celeste stood. "The centerpiece is off-center. Fix it, please. And the water glasses are smudged. Did you even check them?" She turned back to her guests without waiting for an answer. "I'm sorry. The help sometimes needs reminding that details matter." One of the women smiled politely. Another looked briefly at the floor. Celeste walked to the table, moved the centerpiece a single inch, lifted 2 glasses she had already polished twice, and carried them back to the kitchen. She stood at the sink and ran the water cold and held her wrists under it for a moment. Not because she was upset, she told herself, just because the kitchen was warm. She had not done anything wrong. She knew she had not done anything wrong. But that was the point, she realized. That was exactly the point. Brianna didn't need a reason. She just needed an audience. Brianna ran the house like a performance that never ended. Celeste was up at 5:30 every morning, invisible except when needed. No personal calls after 9, no use of the family living room. One day off, Sunday. The rest of the week belonged entirely to the limestone house on Lincoln Avenue and to the woman inside it who had decided, without ever saying it directly, that Celeste was not a person so much as a function. The cruelty never announced itself. It came in layers. A task reassigned so Celeste spent her free hour redoing work already completed. A correction delivered in front of guests. A tone that was always just warm enough to be denied later. "I'm not asking for much," Brianna said once, watching Celeste scrub the stovetop. "I just need things to be excellent. Is that so difficult?" Celeste did not respond. She kept scrubbing. You could not win an argument with a woman who controlled your paycheck, your bed, and your Sunday. So she kept her voice in her chest and thought about Jordan's tuition and Amara's future, and she scrubbed the stovetop until it gleamed. The decision that would change everything happened 8 months earlier on a February evening. Celeste had stopped outside the cracked door of the master suite to knock and heard Raymond's voice, urgent and low, talking to someone on the phone. "Meridian Defense, I'm telling you, David, the contract with the Pentagon is done, confirmed. It's not public yet, but it will be by the end of quarter. And with the situation heating up in the Levant, if that escalates, these shares will move like nothing we've ever seen. I already repositioned half the portfolio." She stood there for 4 seconds, then knocked, delivered the towels, walked back downstairs to her 4th-floor room. The radiator clicked. February Chicago pressed gray against the window. She sat on the edge of her bed and opened her phone and searched the company. She thought about her mother's Bible, the folded paper tucked inside it with 2 words in blue ink: "Act now." It took her 3 days to decide. She sold her mother's gold, the chain and ring left to her, worth $4,800 at the pawn shop on Halsted. She combined it with every dollar in her savings. At 11 o'clock on a Thursday night, she bought $9,800 worth of Meridian Defense Systems stock with shaking hands, said a prayer without words, and put the phone face down on the mattress. 6 months passed. The stock moved sideways. It dipped. It recovered. Nothing happened the way Raymond had predicted, or at least not yet. The weight of it was enormous. Everything she had, including her mother's memory, placed on a hunch she couldn't explain to anyone and couldn't undo. She never sold. But the hope that had carried her through February was harder to find by November. Then her phone got wet. A knocked vase, a soaked apron pocket, and it was gone. She asked to go to the repair shop Tuesday. No. Wednesday. No. Thursday. No. Sunday was her day. Sunday was 4 days away, and Jordan had been trying to reach her. She had bet the only thing she had on the one thing nobody had given her permission to believe in. That takes a different kind of courage. Lily got sick on a Wednesday. It started as a cough during breakfast, just one, muffled into her sleeve, and by the afternoon her face had gone the color of old parchment, and her eyes had that glazed, underwater quality that Celeste recognized from raising 2 children through winters in a drafty apartment. She touched the back of her hand to the girl's forehead when she brought up her after-school snack and felt the unmistakable radiating warmth of a fever climbing. "I'm fine," Lily said, not looking up from the book she was pretending to read. "You're not fine, baby," Celeste said quietly. "Miss Brianna says I'm dramatic about being sick." Celeste stood still for a moment. Then she went downstairs to the kitchen pantry where she kept a small bag tucked behind the extra paper towels, a collection of things she'd brought from home. Dried elderberries, ginger root, raw honey from a church sale. Her mother had made her these things through every fever, every cold, every flu that came through their apartment on the south side. She boiled water. She steeped the elderberries in ginger. She stirred in honey until it dissolved into amber warmth. She brought the cup upstairs. Lily looked at it, then at Celeste. "What is that?" "Something my mother made me. Drink it slow." Lily drank it slow. By the time Celeste came back to collect the empty cup 2 hours later, the girl had fallen into the kind of deep, honest sleep that only comes when a body finally lets itself rest. She'd kicked 1 foot out from under the blanket. Her breathing was even. The line between her eyebrows, a line she wore even while awake, a line no 14-year-old should have, had smoothed away. Celeste pulled the blanket up over her shoulder and stood there for a moment in the dim room. She thought about Amara at that age. She turned off the lamp and closed the door. Brianna came home at 6:30. She walked upstairs, knocked on Lily's door, received no answer, and pushed it open. Lily, groggy, explained about the fever, explained about the drink Celeste had made, showed the empty cup on her nightstand. Brianna walked back downstairs and found Celeste in the kitchen preparing dinner. The way she entered the room, the particular quality of her silence before she spoke, was enough to make the air change. "You gave my stepdaughter something from your personal supply." "She had a fever. It was elderberry and ginger. I didn't ask what it was. I asked if you did it." "Yes. Without asking me. You weren't home. She needed me to decide what she needed. You are the help, Celeste. You are paid to clean this house. You are not paid to make medical decisions for my family. Do you understand the difference?" Celeste set down the wooden spoon. She looked at Brianna directly. It was not defiance exactly. It was the thing her mother had given her, the posture, the refusal to look at the floor just because someone wanted her to. "She was sick. I gave her herbal tea. That's all I did." "That's insubordination." "Then fire me." Brianna went very still. Her jaw moved once, then settled. She looked at Celeste the way a person looks at something they have decided to punish rather than discard, because discarding it would feel too much like mercy. "No," she said finally. "I won't fire you. But you'll sleep outside tonight. You can use the garden chair. The porch is available. You step back inside before 6 a.m., and I'll call Raymond and have your things on the curb by noon." Celeste stared at her. "It's below zero out there." "Then you should have thought about that before you decided to practice medicine in my house." Raymond wasn't home. He was at a firm dinner downtown. His phone, Celeste knew, would not be something Brianna would ever allow her to call. She stood in the kitchen for 10 seconds after Brianna left the room, holding the wooden spoon, breathing carefully through her nose. Then she put on every layer she owned. The temperature outside was minus 10 degrees Celsius. That is 14 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the kind of cold that doesn't feel like cold at first. It feels like pressure, like the air is leaning on you, like the world has decided to squeeze. Celeste knew Chicago winter. She had been born inside it, but she had never been pushed into it as punishment, and there is a different quality to cold that is imposed on you. It has intention in it, and intention makes it heavier. She sat in the iron garden chair near the stone fountain, which had been turned off for the season. She had layered her gray work uniform under a sweater under her wool coat. She had her knit hat pulled down over her ears. She had no gloves. She'd left them on the 4th floor and hadn't been given the chance to retrieve them. She tucked her hands inside her sleeves and sat with her back straight and her eyes on the back fence and breathed in and out slowly, the way her mother had taught her to do when the world was trying to make her fall apart. The garden was dark. The kitchen lights were on upstairs. She could see the window of the 2nd floor, Lily's room, and noticed the curtain move slightly, as though someone had looked out and then looked away. The fountain was a block of silence. The bare elm trees at the back of the property listed gently in the wind. She did not cry, not because she wasn't broken, but because tears freeze, and she had learned a long time ago to save her body's resources for surviving, not grieving. She thought about Jordan. She thought about the fact that her phone was dead and had been dead for 4 days, and Jordan had been trying to reach her, and she had no idea what he wanted to say. She thought about the stock and the 4 days of radio silence and wondered if something had happened, if it had collapsed, if she had lost everything she had placed on that quiet Wednesday night prayer. She thought about her mother's gold chain, about the pawn shop receipt she still had in her drawer upstairs, folded into a small square. She had imagined, when she sold the chain, that she would be able to buy it back someday. That was the deal she had made with herself and with her mother in the private way that the living make promises to the dead. She would take the risk, and if it worked, she would go back for the chain. If it didn't work, she would have tried, and trying would have to be enough. An hour passed, maybe more. The cold had moved from sensation to numbness in her fingers, and she had shifted to pressing her fists against her thighs beneath the coat when she heard it. The sound of tires on the private lane beside the house. Slow, deliberate. Not the rushed compression of a delivery vehicle or the skip of a rideshare. Something heavy and unhurried, as though the vehicle had all the time in the world and knew it. She turned her head. The headlights appeared first, wide set and low and intensely white, the kind of light that illuminates not just the road, but the space around the road, as though announcing itself. Then the body of the car emerged from the dark of the lane and into the faint glow of the estate's perimeter lighting. Black. Absolutely black, with the quality of depth that comes from paint that has been buffed to the point of looking liquid. The Rolls-Royce Cullinan, the spirit of ecstasy on the hood, catching the light for just a moment, the angel poised in flight above everything beneath her. It stopped directly in front of the garden gate. The rear door opened. A young man stepped out, 6 feet tall, a long charcoal overcoat. He stood on the pavement and looked through the iron gate into the garden, and when his eyes found her, sitting alone in the iron chair in the dark, in the middle of a November that was trying to kill something, he went absolutely still for 1 second. And then he walked to the gate and pulled it open and came across the garden in 7 long strides and crouched in front of her and put both of his hands over her frozen fists. "Mama."
Celeste looked at her son's face. Jordan Monroe, 20 years old, wearing a coat that cost more than her monthly salary, kneeling in the garden of the house that had put her outside in the cold, and the expression on his face was something she had never seen there before. Grief and fury and joy and disbelief, all occupying the same face at the same time, like weather. "What are you doing out here?" he said. "What is this? Why are you out here?" "My phone," she said. Her voice came out rough. "My phone broke. I've been waiting for Sunday to fix it. I've been calling you for 4 days. I know." "Mama." He squeezed her hands. "I've been trying to tell you. The stocks, Meridian Defense. It happened. There was a conflict, escalation in Lebanon, Syria, the whole region, and the Pentagon announcement dropped the same week.
The shares went from $7 to $62 in 2 days. 2 days, Mama. I found the login in your email account because I was worried about you, and I sold everything, every share, before it could drop back." Celeste Monroe sat in the iron chair in the garden of the Caldwell house in minus 10 degrees Celsius Chicago cold, and heard what her son said, and could not immediately process what it meant. "How much?" she said. "A little over $1 million, Mama. After taxes and fees. Just over $1 million. It's in your account right now." The fountain was silent. The elm trees swayed. Somewhere inside the house, a light went on in an upper window. Jordan stood up gently and put his arm around her shoulders, and she rose with him, and he walked her toward the gate. "We're leaving now," he said. "You're not coming back." From the kitchen window, 3 floors up, Brianna Caldwell stood in her silk robe and watched. She watched the young man kneel beside Celeste in the garden, that iron chair, that cold, and take her frozen hands in his. She watched the Rolls-Royce waiting at the gate, engine idling, black against the black of the lane, unhurried in the way that only certain kinds of power are unhurried. She watched Celeste stand. She watched the two of them walk toward the gate together, the young man carrying something in his bearing that she could not immediately name. And for the first time all night, for the first time in the 14 months Celeste Monroe had worked in her house, Brianna looked uncertain. Not angry, not calculating, just very still, with her hand pressed flat against the cold glass of the window, watching the gate close behind them. She stopped at the gate. She looked back at the house, at the kitchen window, at the warm light inside. She thought about Lily, asleep upstairs with her fever broken, breathing evenly under the blanket Celeste had pulled up to her shoulder. She thought about what kind of life that girl had ahead of her in that house, with that woman. She took a breath, then she went inside.
Brianna Caldwell had come downstairs the moment she saw the headlights through the kitchen window. She was standing in the back doorway in her silk robe when Celeste and Jordan walked in from the garden, arms crossed, mouth already set, composing herself the way she always did when something had happened that she needed to control before it got away from her. "You need to tell your visitor to move that car," Brianna said. "It's blocking the service lane." Celeste walked past her without a word. Up the first flight of stairs, up the second, up to the 4th floor where her room was. Jordan waited in the downstairs hall. Brianna stood at the bottom of the staircase and said nothing, because there was nothing yet to say to a woman who was still, technically, her employee. It took Celeste 11 minutes to pack. She was precise. She took everything that was hers and touched nothing that wasn't. She stripped the bed and folded the sheets at the foot of the mattress. Her mother had raised her to leave places cleaner than she found them, regardless of how those places had treated her. On the way back down, she stopped at the second floor and knocked on Lily's door. "It's Celeste. I'm leaving, sweetheart. I wanted to say goodbye." The door opened. Lily stood in her pajamas, fever-flushed, eyes clearer than they had been 2 hours ago. She looked at the bags. She looked at Celeste's face. "Did she put you outside?" "You're going to be all right," Celeste said quietly. "You hear me? You are going to be so far beyond all right." "I'll tell my dad," Lily said. "In the morning." "Take care of yourself first," Celeste said. "That's all." She squeezed the girl's hand. Then she heard the front door open below. Raymond's voice, low and surprised, asking Jordan who he was. She had not known Raymond was home. She had assumed the firm dinner would run late. But there he was, still in his dress shirt and overcoat, standing in his own entryway looking at a young man he had never seen before, standing beside 2 duffel bags in his front hall. Celeste came down the stairs with her coat on and her bags in hand. Brianna appeared from the kitchen side of the hall, positioning herself slightly behind Raymond the way a person stands behind something they intend to use as cover. "Raymond," Brianna said quickly. "She's leaving in the middle of the night. She had an unauthorized visitor. She violated the household rules and she—" "Mr. Caldwell," Celeste said. Her voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. There was something in it, a stillness, a gravity, that made Raymond turn toward her fully and made Brianna stop speaking mid-sentence. "I have worked in your house for 14 months. I have cleaned every room, cooked when asked, and cared for your daughter when she was sick, which is why I'm standing here right now instead of upstairs in my bed. Your wife put me outside tonight in -10 degrees Celsius cold because I gave Lily a cup of herbal tea for a fever. No coat, no gloves, no way back inside." Raymond's expression shifted. Something moved behind his eyes. Not quite belief yet, but the thing that comes just before it. "Celeste," Brianna started. "I'm not finished," Celeste said, still calm, still looking at Raymond. "There's something else you should know. The closet in your home office, the gray one beside the bookshelf. I've cleaned that room every week for 14 months. 4 months ago, I noticed the lockbox inside it was open. I didn't look on purpose, but I saw enough. Cash, Mr. Caldwell, not a little. And it wasn't there the month before. I don't know what your wife told you about the household accounts, but I know what I saw. And I know it wasn't there before she had the account passwords changed in August." The hallway went absolutely silent. Raymond turned slowly toward Brianna. Brianna's arms uncrossed, her chin lifted, the reflex of a woman preparing a denial. But something in Raymond's face made the words stop before they reached her mouth. "That's a lie," she said finally. "She's lying because she got caught breaking the rules and she wants—" "Your daughter has been miserable in this house for 3 years, Celeste said. "You've been at the office. I've been here. I've seen it every day. Lily is a good, quiet, remarkable child, and she has been walking on eggshells in her own home since the day your wife moved in. Ask her yourself. Ask her in the morning. She's 14 years old and she already knows how to make herself invisible so she doesn't upset the wrong person. No child should know how to do that." Raymond said nothing. He looked like a man standing in a room he thought he knew, realizing the walls were in different places than he remembered. Celeste picked up her bags. She looked at Brianna one last time, at the silk robe, the perfect posture, the expression that was working very hard to remain composed. She set one of the bags down, reached into her coat pocket, and pulled out an envelope. She had asked Jordan for it in the garden, folded it there in the cold. $5,000 in cash that Jordan had brought from the bank that afternoon as spending money for the trip. She held it out to Brianna. "Ma'am," she said, "what I just told your husband. After tonight, you might be needing this. Keep it. Consider it a tip. It might come in handy." Brianna stared at the envelope. She did not take it for a long moment. Then, Slowly, with the mechanical movement of someone whose body is operating independently of their mind, she reached out and took it. Celeste picked up her bag, nodded once to Raymond, and walked to the front door. Jordan opened it. The Chicago night rushed in, still brutal, still well below zero, but it felt entirely different now. It felt like the beginning of something, instead of the middle of something unbearable. She did not look back. Brianna Caldwell stood in the open doorway of her own house and watched the Rolls-Royce Cullinan pull away from the curb. She watched it move down the private lane. She watched it turn onto Lincoln Avenue without hurrying, without hesitation, the spirit of ecstasy on the hood catching the last of the streetlight before it disappeared into the dark of the city. She stood there long after the taillights were gone. The envelope was still in her hand. Raymond had already gone upstairs. She could hear his footsteps above her, slow, deliberate, moving toward his daughter's room. The cold came through the open door and reached her. She didn't close it for a long time. Jordan explained it all on the drive. He'd found the brokerage account by going through her email after 4 days of silence. He'd known about her phone troubles from a text she'd sent before it died, asking him to be patient, that she'd reach him Sunday. But Sunday was too far and the news was too big, and he'd driven 6 hours from downstate after selling the shares, trying to reach her through the house landline, which Brianna had answered twice and told him Celeste was unavailable. He had driven anyway. He had not called ahead because he was 20 years old, and the woman he loved most in the world was not answering, and that was all the information he needed. "Where did you get the car?" Celeste asked. "I rented it," Jordan said. "I wanted you to arrive somewhere good and something that said you arrived." She looked at him for a long time. He was his father's height, but his mother's stillness, that quality of taking up exactly as much space as he needed, and no more. He had grown something in his face since August, a gravity. She recognized it as the weight of having handled a very large thing alone, and decided to carry it quietly until he could lay it at the right feet. $1,014,000, he said. "That's what it settled to after fees. I put it in a money market account until you could decide." Celeste looked back out the window. A Chicago transit bus rumbled past. A woman in scrubs waited at a corner. A man walked a dog wearing a small coat against the cold. "I want to pay for your school," she said, "and Amara's. Mama, and I want to buy back the gold." Jordan was quiet. "The chain your grandmother left you?" "I sold it to make the investment. I have the pawn shop receipt in my bag, if they still have it." Jordan didn't say anything to that. He reached over and covered her hand with his. The car moved south through Chicago, through the cold, through the long, patient city that had watched her survive for 32 years without ever once giving her a thing she hadn't earned. They went to Amara first. She was staying at Celeste's sister's apartment on the south side. It was nearly midnight when they arrived, and Amara answered the door in her socks and looked at the car in the parking lot, and then looked at her mother and said nothing at first, just opened the door wider and stood back and pressed her mouth together, and then turned away for a moment, and Jordan said, "She knows," and Celeste walked inside. That night the three of them sat around her sister Dorothea's kitchen table while Dorothea made coffee, and Celeste told them the whole thing. The overheard conversation, the pawn shop, the $9,800 placed into a brokerage account at 11 o'clock on a February night with shaking hands. 6 months of watching the numbers stay flat, the phone dying, being put outside in -10 degrees Celsius because she had made the child of the woman who employed her a cup of ginger tea. By the time she was done, the coffee was cold and nobody had drunk any of it, and Dorothea was sitting with her hand over her mouth, and Amara was wiping her eyes with the heel of her palm in the way she did when she was trying not to let it show. "What are you going to do now?" Dorothea said. Celeste thought about it for a moment. "I'm going to rest for about 2 weeks," she said. and then I'm going to figure out the next thing. The next thing took shape over the following months. Celeste was deliberate about it. She had not become someone who moved without thinking. She put $400,000 into a high-yield investment account, careful and boring and exactly as safe as it needed to be for her peace of mind. She paid for Jordan's remaining tuition at DePaul in full, $17,000, and for Amara's first 2 years at the Illinois Institute of Technology's architecture program, which had accepted her with a partial scholarship that Celeste's contribution completed. She bought back her mother's gold chain from the pawn shop on Halsted, which had kept it in the case unsold, and she put it around her neck and did not take it off again. She took the remaining capital and, working with a financial advisor her brother-in-law recommended, invested in a mixed-use commercial property on the south side, a small building with a ground-floor retail space and 2 apartment units above. The retail space she leased to a black-owned bakery that had been operating from a home kitchen for 3 years and couldn't afford the step up. The apartment she rented at fair market rate to a single mother and a retired teacher named Mr. Gaines, who had lived in the neighborhood for 40 years and was being priced out by new development. She was not wealthy in the way the Caldwells were wealthy. She had no Bentley, no crystal chandelier, no housekeeper. She had a 2-bedroom apartment on the south side with a good kitchen and a window that looked out over a block she had grown up on. She had her mother's chain. She had her children's futures. She had, for the first time in her adult life, the experience of waking up in the morning without the weight of a month-end shortfall pressing down on her chest. That, she decided, was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. Raymond Caldwell called her in December, 3 weeks after she had left. She didn't answer. He called twice more. On the 3rd attempt, she picked up. "I want to apologize," he said. He sounded tired in a specific way, the way a man sounds when he has learned something about his own house that he should have seen long before now and is not quite ready to hold all of it yet. "Lily told me," he said. "Everything. What happened that night. I want you to know Mr. Caldwell," Celeste said gently, "you don't owe me an apology. You need to focus on your daughter. That's where your attention belongs right now." A pause. "She asked for you," he said. "Lily. She wanted me to tell you." Celeste closed her eyes for a moment. "Tell her she's going to be more than all right," Celeste said. "Tell her I meant it." She hung up. She stood at her kitchen window looking out at the block and thought about the girl, the careful line between her brows, the way she'd said, "Miss Brianna says I'm dramatic about being sick." She hoped the girl had someone in her corner now. She hoped Raymond was paying attention with both eyes. Some people needed to lose something before they started looking at what they had. She hoped he was looking. Brianna Caldwell's interior design firm began losing clients in the spring. It happened the way things tend to happen when the truth is finally left unsupervised long enough to move around. Slowly at first, and then all at once. Lily, quiet and 14 and underestimated by everyone who looked at her, had spoken to her grandparents in Hyde Park. Her grandparents had spoken to Raymond's family. Raymond's family had spoken to Raymond. And Raymond Caldwell, a man who had believed in his wife with the blind and comfortable faith of someone who had never had to question comfort, began finally, carefully, to look at the shape of his own home. What he found, when he started looking, was a pattern. The household account withdrawals that didn't match the expenses, the lockbox in the home office that Brianna explained away twice with different stories, the way Lily flinched sometimes when Brianna walked into a room. The pattern was the problem. The whole picture was the problem. He moved out of the master suite in April and into the guest room, and by May the attorneys had been retained. There was no prenuptial agreement. Raymond had trusted too completely and too early to have thought about protection. His attorney explained the implications, and Raymond listened and said very little. But what he had discovered in the household accounts, the quiet, systematic siphoning that Celeste had first noticed without knowing its full shape, changed the legal calculation entirely. A divorce grounded in financial misconduct, documented and provable, was a different matter from an ordinary separation. Brianna's attorney pushed hard. Raymond's pushed harder. By September, the settlement was finalized. Brianna Caldwell walked away from the limestone house on North Lincoln Avenue with almost nothing. No stake in the property, no share of Raymond's firm assets. Her own business, already bleeding clients, barely covered her lease. The white Range Rover went back. The River North studio was sublet. 3 years of careful positioning in Chicago's wealthy social world, and she left it the way people leave places they were never quite as secure in as they appeared. Quietly, with very little to show for the time spent. None of this was Celeste's doing. She had spoken her truth on one night, in one hallway, to one man who needed to hear it. She had made no calls after that, sent no letters, filed no complaints. She had simply left. But the truth, once spoken, had its own momentum. It didn't need Celeste to drive it anywhere. It knew where it was going. Celeste heard the final details of the divorce through Dorothea, who heard them from a cousin who worked in the same building as Raymond's law firm. No settlement, no property share, nothing. She said nothing when she heard it. She did not feel triumphant. What she felt was something quieter, a kind of settling, the way the air settles after a storm is moved through and the pressure finally equalizes and everything becomes simply itself again. She thought about the envelope, the $5,000 she had handed to Brianna in that hallway. She wondered if it had felt like charity in the moment, or like a warning, or like both at once. She decided it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had given it, freely, without anger, with nothing owed. That was the difference between the two of them. Celeste had always known how to give. Brianna had only ever known how to take. On a Saturday morning in September, almost a full year after the night of the garden and the iron chair and the cold, Celeste drove to the pawn shop on Halsted. Not to buy anything, just because it was on her route and she had a habit of driving through the neighborhood she'd grown up in on Saturday mornings, slowly, with the windows down, letting the city speak to her. She was wearing the gold chain. The small ring from her mother's collection was on her right hand. She had on a good coat, not expensive, but well-made dark wool, the kind of coat that announces that a woman has stopped apologizing for needing warmth. She parked and walked along Halsted and stopped at the bakery she leased the ground floor retail space to. Sisters in Flour, it was called, run by 2 women named Pamela and Greta who had been feeding their neighborhood from home kitchens for years. The window was steamed from the oven. Inside, 2 customers stood at the counter. The cinnamon smell reached the street. Pamela saw her through the glass and raised a hand. Celeste raised one back. She kept walking. She thought about her mother who had once told her, "Baby, the point is never the money. The money is just proof. The point is what you believed about yourself before anyone else could see it." She walked one more block and then turned back. The city around her was exactly what it had always been, large and cold and indifferent in the way that all cities are indifferent, and alive in the way that all cities that belong to the people inside them are alive. She had belonged to this city her whole life. She had paid into it in labor and faith and sacrifice. And finally, quietly, without anyone giving her permission, it had begun to pay her back. She got in her car and drove home. The gold chain rested at her collarbone. The sun, pale and October thin, came through the windshield and fell across her hands on the wheel. She drove. She was not in a hurry. She had nowhere to arrive that wasn't already hers. There is a kind of cruelty that mistakes power for permanence, that believes, because it can put someone outside in the cold, that it has the final word. It doesn't. The final word belongs to the person who, in the worst moment, still knows who they are. Celeste Monroe did not win because she was lucky. She won because she had spent 32 years building the one thing no house could take from her: the posture, the stillness, the faith in her own hunch when the numbers weren't moving and the chain was gone and the phone was dead and the night was -10 degrees Celsius, and someone who didn't know her thought they were punishing her into nothing. They were not punishing her into nothing. They were sitting inside a warm house, entirely unaware that a Rolls-Royce was already on its way. Your turn. If someone put you outside in the cold, literally or figuratively, and you came back standing taller than they will ever be, would you say anything to them? Or would you let the silence say everything?